Welcome, security pros, to another Hacker News webinar. As you can tell, Yiftach is joining me again from Silverfort. Yiftach and I have done, I don't know how many of these webinars together. You guys keep saying, bring Yiftach back. So we do. We do all the time. Yiftach, welcome to another Hacker News webinar, buddy. It's great to have you back.
Hi, James. Pleasure to be here, as always.
It's absolutely amazing. So for all you security pros kind of logging in, getting ready for today's webinar, I'm obviously not in my natural habitat either. My studio is actually going through a renovation. I won't be back in it till middle of next month, and so and I'm traveling. So all in all, I'm out. But we've got a packed webinar. Um, a lot of really great information coming. The Identity Underground report by our friends over at Silverfort. For everyone tuning in right now, we're about to get started. I'll pass the floor here to Yiftach here in just a moment. But before I do, just all your questions, all your comments, as you're going along. We see them all. We love your feedback. We love for you to participate. We want you to be an active part of this webinar. Now, Yiftach and I know your time is valuable. We're going to try to get you done in like 30 to 35 minutes today.
Mhm.
That's our goal. There's a live demo as we go through this report. So please stick around because you're actually going to see that this isn't just a slide. And what we're talking about today is actually something that can really help you de-risk your security program. So without further ado, Yiftach, I'll pass the ball over to you. The Identity Underground report. Floor is all yours, buddy.
Thanks. Cool. So, the Identity Underground report. What is that? So, first of all, Identity Underground is an extremely cool name, whatever it means. But what it means in our context is we at Silverfort, as some of you may not already know, we deal with identity protection. And as part of it, our product monitors hundreds of environments on-prem and in the cloud, uh, continuously monitoring every authentication and access attempt, everything that happens from the identity aspect. And we figured out about 6 months ago, let's try to get some insight into what actually happens, not in terms of attacks that are launched, but of the exposures, the weaknesses, the inherent security gaps that enable identity threats to actually take place. Okay, it sounds a bit vague, but it will be. Well, let's dive deep into that, and we'll understand that in a minute. So basically, we're saying, let's think about a term: identity threat exposure. What is that? It's a security weakness that exposes the environment to either credential access, privilege escalation, or lateral movement. All of these three, these are within the standard cyber kill chain. These are the parts that involve identities. Okay, these are the part that basically are about compromising an identity, ensuring that this compromised identity is indeed a lethal weapon, and taking it into action. Okay, now in the malware world, in the endpoint world, we have what we call vulnerabilities, right? And they're assigned with a CVE, with a number, but in the identity sphere, it's a bit different. Okay, so keep in mind this term, identity threat exposure. We'll soon revisit it. Identity threat exposure, or we'll refer to it as ITE, is caused by either misconfiguration, legacy identity infrastructure, malpractice, or insecure built-in features. Okay, I assume there are probably some of you, if not all. I'm just kidding. All of you are probably managing Active Directory, right? We basically all know that this is prone to misconfigurations, to stuff going bad, to people not managing it in the right manner. Okay, all of this creates security gaps. Okay, again, these security gaps are the ITEs that we'll talk about. And of course, as soon as we drop in also the integration between your AD to your Entra or Azure or Okta, things become even more complex and error prone. Now, the common on-prem AD environment hosts multiple ITs, okay? And these are actually the one expose it to data theft and ransomware spread. Why? Because identity is at the root of every high-profile breach. Identity is at the root of lateral movement. And basically, it means that any ransomware attack that hits more than one endpoint entails the use of compromised identities. Every breach that entails the theft of valuable data from the targeted organization server again, incorporates lateral movement, which means compromised identity was involved. And James, can we do? Is there an option of polling, or just we can? I would ask you to. I would really like to refer a question to the audience. Uh, well, I would like everyone that, except from Active Directory, also has an Okta or an Entra ID or an Azure ID or whatever the name is, a cloud identity provider. How many of you sync your passwords or hashes from your on-prem AD to your cloud identity provider? If
So if you do sync it, give us a thumbs up in the comments. If you don't, give us a thumbs down, and we'll see who does and who doesn't. And did you see that how awesome AI is? It actually gives when I do a thumbs up, it actually puts one. See on the screen right there, it's a bubble. I know I sync, so there's my thumbs up. Um, uh, and we're seeing a lot of thumbs up. You got a lot of syncing, Yiftach.
of course, and
There's some thumbs down too. I'm not gonna lie. There's a good amount. I don't know. It looks
okay. So actually,
looks good.
again, I would say, as in this, as far as I know, most people sync. One of the findings of the data that most people sync, it actually makes sense, right? Because when you do sync your password, it means that your employees can, with the same username and password, log in to their on-prem resources, as well as their SaaS apps. So syncing definitely makes sense, but actually but insecure sync can be quite a nightmare, as we'll soon see. So these are the key insights that we got from the report. And let's talk about these ITEs in a bit more in more detail. So as you can imagine, there are tons of ITEs, but within the report we had a very strict inclusion criteria. The first one was we need the ITE to be impactful. Okay, if it helps you to compare that to CVEs, so CVEs you rate from low to critical based on their potential impact. So we've actually included only ITEs that their exploitation will cause significant impact. Okay, enabler of direct malicious activity. I see I had a typo here, and so it's mea culpa, my fault. It also has to be exploitable, which means if an attacker is in the environment, it should be the attacker. They should be able to easily discover this ITE, okay, and within a standard foothold, they should be able to use it as well, and it should be also prevalent, which means we actually found some very cool stuff, but it existed only in a very minor subset of the accounts. Okay, so in order the ITs that we'll talk about today are impactful, exploitable, and prevalent. Okay, does that make sense so far?
Absolutely.
Amazing. Some insights. Okay, 2/3 of user accounts authenticate with NTLM. Okay, that was actually a sport. Like I would say, usually I ask people how much NTLM authentication you think you have in your environment. Now, actually, most people will say, I don't know, 20%, 30%, 10%. There's sort of a common assumption that most of the AD authentication is carried out in Kerberos. Okay, I know that I thought so. Actually, we found out like in 2/3 of user accounts authenticate regularly with NTLM. Okay, and we'll dive deeper into NTLM in a minute. Okay, but this is a major security risk. 67% sync their on-prem password to cloud in an insecure manner. Okay, this is to say it's not only that 67, there are probably more than 67% that sync, but 67% sync in a way that open your SaaS environment to compromise, and 109 new shadow admins are created with a single Active Directory misconfiguration. Okay, think of it. Things might be amazing today. Okay, but it takes just one error, one single misclick of button to create, on average, we've seen actually much more, 109 shadow admins in your environment. Okay, some additional, 31% of accounts are service accounts, 13% our accounts are stale, and 12% of admin accounts are configured with unconstrained delegation. These are insights that I would argue that most people don't have visibility into. Okay, and there are much more than what we have here are just the nuggets. And as always, like in as in all other fields, in cybersecurity is no exception. Knowledge is power. Okay, if you know what the problem is, it means you can take proactive steps to mitigate it. If you don't know what you have, if you don't know what the attack surface is, if you don't know where you are exposed, you don't even have a solid starting point to begin from. I couldn't resist. Okay, so because the report is so amazingly designed, I allowed myself to show you how this looks in the report itself. I do encourage you to download the report, even just for the sake of enjoying this beautiful graphics. And if also you'll gain some valuable knowledge, even better. Let's talk about the ITEs and the different type of attacks that they enable. So let's start with password access, mean disclosure of the clear text password. Okay, these are ITEs that, when exploited by the attacker, provide them access not only to the Kerberos ticket or to the password hash, but to the actual password itself. Okay, if we want to let's say in talks in terms of the MITRE framework, these are enabler of the credential access, but again with a special focus on password. Okay, not credentials in general, but specifically password. There's also privilege escalation. These are ITEs that would enable you as an attacker, if you have an initial foothold, if you had an initial account compromise, to take this account and assign it higher access privileges, increasing, of course, the blast radius of your malicious activity. And of course, as always, our favorite, lateral movement. I mean, these are ITEs that will enable you as an attacker to conduct an oft under the radar lateral movement that will be very hard to detect. And together with these three, we have the ones that I call them, they would enable you to evade detection. Okay, and basically means these are would say, these will act as boosters to the other three, and will make the detection of your security measures much more challenging. We'll touch now. We don't have time, and neither do we have an inclination to do the tedious work of going through the entire report. What I'm going to show you in this webinar, I'm going to share with you highlights of three of what I believe, I would say three or four of, I think, the most common and the most exploitable, the most impactful ITEs in the report. Okay, then we'll go to the demo, and again, and if you and I would say what I would like you to have, like in the back of your skull while I'm presenting, is sort of asking yourself, do what I see now exists in my environment or not? Okay, so let's start the actual journey. For that, I want to talk to you about something. Now, as we all know, okay, this is the age of the cloud, right? We've been told, we've been brainwashed for almost a decade that everything is cloud native, cloud born, fourth generation, whatever. It's the lingo for quite a time. But I think most of you will agree with me that I would say it will be more accurate to say that we're not in the cloud era, we're in the hybrid era, right? Because in the foreseeable future, I think 90% of us will have both on-prem identity infrastructure and cloud identity infrastructure, right? We'll have Active Directory, but we'll also have Okta. We'll also have Azure AD or Entra ID, okay? And it's important to understand that when you maintain this type of infrastructure, there is a very common and very easy attack path. Now, as you all know, and I would say I would definitely want to give kudos where it's deserved. I think both Okta and Microsoft, when they created their cloud IDPs, they've done much better job than Active Directory, right? Like Entra ID is a much more resilient piece of infrastructure, and Okta is a much more resilient piece of infrastructure than Active Directory, which, as we all know, is plagued with ITEs, vulnerabilities, and other bad stuff. But the point is, because when you sync your password, what you do practically is every security gap in Active Directory can easily expose your cloud IDP in your SaaS environment as well. Okay? And this would follow sort of this pattern. Attacker will get an on-prem initial access. In some way, the attacker will be able to compromise password from the on-prem environment, and then the attacker will disengage and from his own computer or her own computer will open a browser and log in to the cloud IDP, to the SaaS application through the cloud IDP portal with the compromised password. Okay, this is a path that we're beginning to see more and more and more. Attackers now realize that the actual gateway to the SaaS environment, the best one, is through the very vulnerable and exposed on-prem, and that's something that we'll explore further on in our slides. Any questions so far, James, or anyone from the audience?
You're getting a lot of comments from the audience, and really good stuff, because I think a lot of times people blankly trust cloud IDP as being inherently more secure, not understanding that the on-prem side of it compromises it. There's a lot of those comments right now in the audience going, I didn't even know this was a threat. So just helps you kind of understand the scale of how easy it is to go down and do an on-prem to SaaS attack path really easily.
Cool. So let's start with our first NTLM authentication. Just a reminder, okay? I assume most people here know what NTLM is. Just let's remind ourselves. NTLM, right? It's the predecessor of Kerberos. It's a legacy protocol for ID authentication, and it uses hashes instead of passwords. And it entails sending the password hashes over the network, over the wire, and it's also stores them in the endpoint's memory. Whenever I'm accessing an endpoint or a server with NTLM, my NTLM hash is stored in the endpoint in the lsas.exe process. Okay, and as we all know, it's very easy for attacker to obtain these hashes either by dumping the LSAS with procdump or mimikatz or whatever, or by obtaining them from the network traffic. Now, the cool thing is, now when I get the hash, the first thing I can do is, of course, is launch a pass the hash attack. Okay, trivial. We see that all the time. But with these hashes, okay, their encryption is very weak comparing to Kerberos, and even to Kerberos, and definitely to other more modern authentication protocols. And basically, it means that attackers can take these hashes, go offline, and decrypt them. And using NTLM, and I think that's the important thing, using NTLM serves adversaries' users' passwords on a silver tray. Okay, when you have NTLM authentication in your environments, you actually, think of a Pac-Man, that wants to swallow the cherry. So these NTLMs, they are like cherries, and they're scattered around your environment in volumes that you don't even imagine. Okay, let's talk about the findings. So we've analyzed authentications. We analyzed the authentication that takes place. So we asked ourselves, is a standard account, is it mostly Kerberos, mostly NTLM, or can be this or that? So what you see here on the left is we've discovered that 36% of accounts, they perform over 80%, most of their authentication, 80% in Kerberos. 16% are purely NTLM, and 48% have actually a 50-50 chance to do either this or that. Which basically means you have 64% of your users, okay, doing NTLM authentication. What's more concerning is that when we've checked the breakdown between admin accounts and non-admin accounts, we have 37% of your admin accounts authentications take place over NTLM. Okay, think of it. Think how easy it is for an attacker that has got an initial foothold to put their hands on an admin NTLM hash, and then convert it into into a password. And again, if we want to explore the on-prem standard attack path, again, you get an initial on-prem access, obtain user hash. Either you do the lateral movement with pass the hash, or you decrypt hash offline and do lateral movement with the password itself, which is much harder to detect. Now, remember what we said about the on-prem to the SaaS attack path. So we have here an environment that has a password sync. As an attacker, I get an initial on-prem access, obtain user hash, decrypt the hash offline, and again, access the SaaS application with this clear text password. Okay, I
and
can do
and,
the
and it's not that hard to decrypt the hash, because I
no,
see some comments here of people saying, well, they've still got to do work there. These hashes are not very hard to decrypt. In fact, it doesn't even take a lot of computing. It's a simple algorithm,
exactly,
readily
basically,
available in any underground market,
exactly.
readily available.
Exactly. I probably should have said before that that what we include as exploitable is any ITE that you have a pack of available available open source tools that enable you to do that. In that case, you have tools to get the hashes, you have tools to decrypt the hashes. Literally, you don't have to invent any wheel to do that. Let's say even if you're a freshman hacker, you should be able to do that without any problem. Okay. This,
Yeah,
by the way,
this attack path is fairly easy. It's in fact the very basic of what any initial access broker would sell on the dark web today.
mhm, exactly. And we see that in attacks all the time. So that was the NTLM again. And I urge you so to reflect, ask yourself, how much of an NTLM traffic do I have in my network? I would say I would bet that in most cases, okay, it's much more than you think. Uh, let's go talk about shadow admins. This is a special type of privilege escalators, and actually shadow admins is a very wide. It's an over. It's I would say it's an over inclusive term. What we mean by shadow admins is that these are members of the domain administrators group that you are not aware of. Now, you have all of your admins are members of the domain administrators group, but sometimes you have a non-member. Okay, you have a user that due to some configuration has the ability to exert power over the actual admins. Okay, and it can replicate directory changes. What is actually most common is you have the ability to reset the user passwords and force password change. And what does that mean? It means that I'm an attacker, and I, as an attacker, I have compromised the user Jane. Now, the user Jane is not an admin, but the user Jane has the ability, the privilege to reset the password or add password to Bob. That is an actual admin. Now, this basically makes user Jane a shadow admin because once the attacker, if the attacker has compromised user Jane, he can easily also compromise the admin Bob, and reset its password and access whatever resource Bob is entitled to. Sometimes it's a bit more complicated. User Joe, okay, user Joe can reset the password of the user Jane. That can do the same for admin Bob, etc., etc. Now, again, discovering this sort of a death chain is also rather easy. I can show you at least 5 scripts that enable you as an attacker to discover exactly that. Now, these type of shadow admins, okay, again, they're actually much more prevalent than you think. Okay, actually, in small and medium organizations, 4% of non-admin users are shadow admins. In large environments, it's 1.2. Now, it might 1.2, in marketing terms, doesn't really seem like a lot, but it's actually tons. If you're a company of 10,000 users, okay, it basically means that what you have, you have as an attacker, you probably, and this is, by the way, this is the average. The median and the median, the max are much larger. And shadow admins, these type of shadow admins are created by having these privileges assigned to them, like modify owner permissions or reset password, right, or properties, or any other like replicating directory, chain permissions, etc. Um, and I think what is the most scary about these type of shadow admins is, remember what we've said before about the 109 shadow admins that are created by single misconfiguration. So we call it shadow burst, okay? And in a way, like 30% of organization will experience a shadow burst within a time frame of 30 days. Now, this shadow burst, okay, will introduce between 70 and 1,000 shadow admins, okay? And it means that if you're not continuously on a daily basis monitor the amount of the shadow admins that you have, okay? If you do it, for example, once a week, there's a great chance that you've done the checking, everything is good. Couple of days afterwards, boom, someone has again clicked the wrong button. You now have 200 shadow admins in your environment. And this, by the way, assuming that you even have a way to detect these shadow admins. Okay, so in order for you to remove their permissions. If you want the attack path with shadow admins, again, quite similar. You get initial access, okay? Then you compromise a shadow admin. You reset the shadow admin's user password. Once you've done that, you can access the SaaS application with a new password, which, by the way, is an admin password. Most chances are that the user that is an admin in the on-prem is also an admin in the SaaS environment as well. Any questions so far?
I think we're all good. We're about 26 minutes into the webinar here. Yiftach, so just want to give you kind of a timer and go ahead, and we'll try to get to some questions here at the end, because I know you want to
Okay,
be mindful of time.
that's great. Okay, so service accounts, I'll go through it very rapidly. Service accounts, they're machine-to-machine accounts, are created either when you install on-prem software or by admins, and they're high access privileges, low visibility, and they're excluded from MFA because they're not human, and from PAM protection. Okay, there are many malpractices that make service accounts invisible and unprotectable, like undocumented creation and hybrid usage. You have tons of service accounts in your environment.
Way too many to manage.
Okay, you have 48% in small, 23 in actually, let's look at it. 56% of organization unknowingly sync more than half of service accounts to their SaaS directory. Okay, these are accounts that have they don't need to be synced into Azure AD or to Okta, yet more than half of our organization sync them there unknowingly, basically increasing their attack surface because they can be compromised there and used for malicious access. Now, and by the way, service accounts, again, 27% solely with NTLM, 19% NTLM and Kerberos, extremely easy to access, extremely easy to compromise. So what I want to say, last thing I want to say before I go over to the demo, is that your identity attack surface, it's a jungle, and it's indeed underground. You don't see what you have underground. I think it's like, actually the best analogy would be, you open up a sword and you see tons of roaches roaming around. Of course, we didn't use that for the report because no one would want to download this. But this is sort of like, we don't have visibility into what's happening down there, and the result is that we are vulnerable because these three ITEs and their peers, that this is what makes lateral movement, credential, password compromise, and privilege access as this is what brought them to be as common as they are now. Now, I want to talk a bit about Silverfort, about our product, and how we are able to help you resolve this type of these risks. Okay, so again, with Silverfort, we see every authentication, we analyze it, we see it in real time because we sit behind Active Directory. So, for example, if there's an NTLM v1 authentication, we show it to you. If you have shadow admins, we show it to you. For example, you see you have 3 shadow admins. Here are their names. Okay, we can actually investigate their activity. We won't do it now because I can because my in my demo environment these shadow admins haven't done anything. I can tell you in advance. I already checked that. Okay, but you will actually be able to see what they do, what they access, and then you can go back to the identity team and say, listen, I think these accounts should either be revoked or reset or have their password reset. You can go, we have night users that their password never expires, Azure Shadow admins, users with old passwords, users with unconstrained litigation or with weak encryption. Okay, we see here a lot, almost all of the ITEs that we've talked about. You can see them here and take action. For example, we can see that we have here authentications over NTL v1. Okay, suppose if we want to if we want to dive into them, okay, we'll see. Okay, these are this is the machine. This machine is a medium risk, right? If we go into the risk indicators, we'll see that there is both NTL v1 and also an attack attempt, the log4 shell exploit attempts. Okay, we'll see the users, the sources, the active policies. We can also go to the log screen, okay, and go there and say, this is the standard that we have, and we say, you know something, let's filter, let's take risk indicator filter. Let's find all the admins with SPN. Let's find all the NTL and v1 authentication. We also talked about shadow admins, right? Okay, we can also search for all the shadow admins activity that we have. And you see here that there are some ITEs I haven't talked about in the session so far, but shared account, shared device, stale users, stale user activity. You basically get here the ability to have granular visibility into everything that happens under the ground in your environment, and then you can actually take action. Okay, so once there'll be action that you'll take directly from your Active Directory. Okay, but you can also, in the meantime, you can mitigate their effect with a policy. You can say, let's configure a risk-based policy. Okay, and say, okay, fine. For example, whenever a shadow admin, okay, or an NTLMV1, okay, or maybe a stale user, okay, whenever I see authentication that entails one of these, okay, not all, it's any. When any of these is detected, let's either require MFA or maybe block access. So what you get here both the visibility into everything that might be wrong in your environment, and also the ability to mitigate it, to mitigate it here with policy, and get the knowledge that you need in order to protect against that in your Active Directory or Entra ID itself.
Yeah, there's a lot in this demo. There's a lot to take in and I see a lot of people kind of look at this. If you don't mind me asking, we have a few questions. I'm going to summarize one or two up here just to kind of consolidate time, because a lot of them are asking the same questions here. And folks in the audience, just what I'm trying to do is be mindful of everyone's time. So one of the first questions, one of the most common questions we're seeing here, Yiftach, is how does this recognize out-of-band services, essentially? How do you recognize out-of-service accounts and whatnot?
Okay, that's a great question. So remember I told you, we see all the authentications in real time. Now, what's the main difference between service accounts and a human account? Service accounts is predictable, okay? Service account is deterministic. Service account is created. When it's created, it's usually associated with scheduled tasks that runs every fixed time, every 9 hours, every couple of days. What we are actually able to do, okay, is to profile the behavior of accounts that are, as you can see, for example, in this service accounts, that the behavior that it's systematic, that repeats itself, and then we say, okay, then we use some other algorithms to cross it with, but basically we're saying this behavior is not a human behavior. It's a service account's behavior. Okay, this in a nutshell is how we do that.
Gotcha. One final question here from the audience goes, how many people were surveyed as part of this report, and what was the most surprising thing you saw in it?
Okay, so people it's what remember it's not a survey, it's authentication data from the environments themselves, and we've sampled, I think it was close to 500 environments. You know, the largest had around like 200,000 users, the smallest had 500. So I would say I think we're talking about around between 2 and 3 million user accounts authenticating,
Wow.
including service accounts and everything else. What's the most surprising? I'll tell you. The most surprising is that on average, every organization has around 12% of their non-admin users that are nevertheless, they access resources in the same volume that their admins are. Okay? Users that are standard users, they're not defined as admins, okay? But somehow they are accessing an exceedingly high volume of resources. And this, by the way, makes sense because I've talked to one of my red teamers friends. He told me we never go for the admins. You know, you just need to wait a bit. Then you find a standard user that can do anything an admin does, and of course, this user won't be subject to the protections that admins are subject to. I think that the volume of these type of users was the most surprising, and also the amount of accounts that just sync all of their on-prem users in a click of a button to the cloud, including their admins. That was really surprising for us.
Amazing. I know we're at time, Yiftach. Anything else you want to get to the crowd before we tell them to go download this report and start to look at how they can mitigate these risks in their organization?
This is actually the most important thing to say. Download report, going and I do want to say it's like, let's zoom out for a minute. I think in the past 20 years, the cybersecurity industry has achieved amazing thing. I think in terms of endpoint protection, we are galaxies away from where we were 10 years ago. In network protection as well. And cloud is actually quite secure even to begin with. In identity, we're still in deficit. We're still 20 years back. And I think, and this is why it's the most targeted attack surface. And I think the best thing the most important thing every identity security, every cybersecurity practitioner should do, okay, is asking themselves, how can I level up my identity protection with all other dimensions of my cybersecurity? The endpoint, the network, the cloud, the data. This is, I believe, the most important task for us cybersecurity practitioners to do now.
Couldn't agree more. Yiftach, thank you so much. Thank you to the team at Silverfort for this webinar. Thank you for all of y'all for tuning in. Please make sure to check out thehackernews.com/webinars for all the latest content. You can also see all the previous webinars Yiftach and I have done together. There's about 4 or 5 of them on there. I guarantee you they're absolutely amazing, and it kind of really does build up this series of information. If you have any topics you want us to cover, please let us know on behalf of myself, the team at the Hacker News, and a special thanks to Yiftach for taking time to be with us today, and the team at Silverfort. Have a great rest of your day, y'all, and most importantly, stay cyber safe.